So without further ado, let me invite Ms. Hurrain, who is a program assistant at IFC, to make her context-setting presentation, which will not only set the course of session, but also demystify some of the jargons we are using, or let's say the normal public uses related to net zero. That to focus on automotive component manufacturing processes. Over to you, Hurrain, please.
Thank you, Zahir. Could I have my slides up, please, Ishwari? Yeah, thank you. So good evening, everyone. Over the next couple of minutes, I'd like to touch upon the concept and impact of net zero emissions, especially in context to the Indian automotive sector. Net zero emissions means cutting the greenhouse gas emissions to as close to zero as possible, with any remaining emissions reabsorbed from the atmosphere. Sectors that are contributing to these greenhouse gas emissions the most at the moment include the buildings, transportation, electricity and heat, and the industrial sector, which includes the automotive manufacturing sector as well. Transitioning to a net zero world is one of the greatest challenges that humankind has faced, and more so when aiming for an equitable transition. It calls for nothing less than a complete transformation of how we produce, how we consume, and how we move about. Net zero is no longer a buzzword, and the voices echoing it will only multiply and get louder over the next years and decades. Can I have the next slide, please? The Net Zero 2050 mission, which has already spurred a flurry of actionable decisions by major players across globally, especially in Europe, in India as well, where we have done the commitments of reaching net zero by 2070. It also includes the automotive sector, which where we have seen a rise in electric vehicle sales. We have seen increase in the marketing of electrical vehicles, and we have also seen a pressure to reduce the manufacturing emissions of the automobiles. 90% of the heavy industry production sector, which also includes the automotive manufacturing sector, will have to operate on low carbon operations by 2050 to be able to reach the global net zero commitments. And the next slide, please. Talking about the India's automotive sector, the automotive sector in India is the 5th largest in the world, and the maximum emissions come from the production at supplier and vendor sites. More than 75% of these Indian auto component manufacturing industries are small and medium enterprises. And in the near future terms, with use phase emissions of automobiles being slated for use, there will be greater onus on the OEMs to shift their focus to manufacturing and material processes. These processes at the moment account for only 20% of the life cycle emissions, but over the decades, these contributions will grow to become 3rd or even higher share of the emissions, approximately in the next coming decades. And with the OEMs, which are aiming to achieve net zero by 2040 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2040, there will be an increasing pressure on the small and medium enterprises to reduce their emissions as they form the supply chain of these OEMs. The net zero transition towards a cleaner and a sustainable manufacturing process actually holds the potential to increase the readiness and the competitiveness of automotive manufacturing sector and the small and medium enterprises that comprise it. At the same time, net zero emission or net zero transition also provides us a platform to be able to improve the gender ratios in the automotive sector and become gender equitable. Auto sector at the moment is at a flashpoint in history, and use of cleaner materials and cleaner manufacturing processes is an immediate need of the hour. I'd like to briefly stop here and ask the listeners for their opinion on what forms the biggest challenges to achieving net zero emissions in the Indian manufacturing sector. Ishwari, could we have the poll up, please? And I would encourage all the participants to give answers in the poll. You can choose more than one option for this. We'll maybe give them 30 seconds. We can end the poll now, Ishwari. It's 45 seconds. Right. So as we can see that all the options that were provided are more or less a challenge towards achieving the net zero emissions. At Institute for Sustainable Communities, we actually aim to the decarbonization and consequent net zero emissions from the auto component manufacturers by creating a pathway for these Indian small and medium enterprises that cater to the automotive OEMs to be able to increase their business competitiveness and give them a strategic advantage through the adoption of green technologies and skilling that will enhance their efficiency, viability, sustainability, and the equity of their businesses. Next slide, Ishwari. Could I have the next slide, please? Yes, thank you. ISC supports the small and medium enterprises by enhancing the awareness around the SMEs for the technologies and effective solutions which are available for decarbonization. It helps in identifying and aggregating the demand for relevant technologies and provides support for the adoption of such clean technologies as well. It helps in making available the funding opportunities for clean technology uptake and in helping in ingraining gender equity into the action towards net zero. Because with gender equity ingrained into net zero, SMEs have an option of leveraging the monetary benefits and other benefits of gender diversity in the workforce. Furthermore, ISC also looks at green skilling and training of the workforce to be able to produce a climate resilient workforce and establishes a local steering alliance which has leaders and experts in the relevant fields which are going to be able to sustain the interventions. Next slide. Taking steps to transition towards net zero early on at this time holds a plethora of benefits for the Indian automotive manufacturing sector and the small and medium enterprises that make it up. It will help with the decarbonization and clean energy promotion, which is in line with the national climate goals, consequently leading to monetary savings, increased market competitiveness through increased energy efficiency and sustainable practices as well. It will also help in the skill development of SMEs and local authorities towards clean technology environment, thereby reducing the gap between the supply and demand of green labor in the SME sector, for leading to a climate resilient workforce, which is the need of the hour. It will promote the participation of millions of untapped potential workers by including and training women in green skill development, which can help us in tackling problems like that of migration, that of lack of skilled labor locally, etc. Also considering India's increased climate action at the moment, decarbonization of SMEs also allows them to take advantage of upcoming and existing climate responsive legislation, through which they can gain benefits for their own growths. And finally, there are also long-term benefits from and partnership with important local players who can sustain a proactive and a profitable climate action in the small and medium enterprises within the automotive sector. I'll stop here and I'll hand it over to Zahir from here.
Thank you so much, Hurrain, for the insightful effort and how you set the whole demystifying context for the net zero in automotive component manufacturing processes.